All right, I am here with my friend Mark Harmon, who is a weekend adventurer and I would say a jack of all trades and master of none, but I think you've mastered a few of the things that you've done, haven't you?
Well, I've made a lot of mistakes, which helped me get a little bit better at things. I'll let you know about the mastery when this ride's over.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're into a lot of the things that people in this area are interested in. We're talking hunting and fishing, but there's so much more to you than just that. I mean, you've got all kinds of skills in terms of being a video maker. You've been a YouTuber in some way as well. You do a lot of volunteering activity, and in your spare time, you're also a mortgage lender over at Northwoods Bank.
Right. Yeah. Eventually,
Northview.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the rub of life. All the things that you want to do, at some point, you still have to pay the bills.
Right.
So those occupations, they get in the way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Northern Illinois. My father, when I grew up, he's now retired as a United Methodist minister in the Northern Illinois Conference. So I was born in DuPage County, Illinois. We lived there until I was 3 weeks old. And then we moved to a town called Glenview. There's a Naval Air Base there, just north of Chicago. But we moved out of there when I was 4. So other than some relationships that carried forward in my life, I don't have a big connection to there. But I grew up and through grade school in a town called Forreston, Illinois, which is about 45 minutes west of Rockford. So people think of Illinois, they think Chicago. Most of us in Illinois don't associate with Chicago. It's really you get into rural agricultural areas and they'll say, the rest of us pay for Chicago. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So anyway, we grew up out there. It was a town of 1,200 people. Where I grew up was on church property, right in the parsonage, right across from my grade school, and the church was right there. So it was kind of in the center of town. The largest building in town was a grain elevator on the train tracks. So, some of my biggest thrills of being a kid was going to hang out with my friends who had farms, that maybe we got to use some equipment. Maybe we broke some, I don't know. And then right around the time, I think my father was thinking that for us to have a better progression into college and stuff, in that time, they would move Methodist ministers about every 4 years. They no longer do that anymore. They realized that was a little bit tougher on families and growing roots and things like that. So
I didn't realize that they did that sort of cycling through.
It was the 70s. Things were done different in the 70s and the 80s. And so we moved to a town called Ottawa. And Ottawa is about halfway between the Quad Cities and Chicago in the center. Basically, where Interstate 39 crosses I-80 is where Ottawa is. And my high school was 1,200 people, the size of the town I just moved from.
Wow.
Right, yeah, so it was a lot bigger. My graduating class was 300. It was a type of place where, I like Park Rapids because everybody has access to opportunities, whether it's sports or you could try out things. We don't have to try out for sports here.
Yeah.
You had to try
needed.
out. Right. From junior high, you had to try out in order to be on the team.
Yeah.
Right.
In Ottawa.
Yep, where I went to high school. In fact, I wasn't really even tall enough to be on our basketball team. I'm 6'2".
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just, just the numbers push people out and stuff like that. Now, granted, there's people that were shorter than me on the basketball team, but they also had talent.
Sure.
And that was a lack of mine. But anyway.
Well, I'm sure you're just being modest, right?
Yeah, no, I'm probably in basketball. My kids would argue that I haven't beat them in horse quite some time. But I mean, so I grew up there and grew up very close to the church. Since sports didn't have my interest as much, Zach, to be honest with you. I worked a lot.
What was your first job?
I was digging fence posts. My grandfather's Great Depression guy, so he didn't believe in steel fence posts. He believed in hedge posts, that you go out and cut the thorns off, and you get post hole diggers, and you start putting those in the ground, then you stretch the fence by hand. Mm-hmm. So those are some of my first jobs. And if you're around the farming area, you do a job by what you are tall enough or big enough or strong enough to do.
Sure.
It's not a matter of, there's no echelon of age to qualify you. It's like, if you can pick up a hay bale, you're in the hay mound stacking hay bales
Yeah.
or throwing them down to the kettle, that kind of stuff. So, but I enjoyed that. I mean, we learn a lot through hardships, and sometimes you can look at it as a hardship of working on a farm, or you could look at it as a really cool opportunity. And I look back on it as very positive, character building and stuff like that. So, my first job, probably, building fence posts. I know I had my first episode of heat exhaustion when I was 12, But it's
how would a person ever develop a good work ethic without going through an experience that was sort of like that?
Well, my honest opinion, a parental component. I think if you environmental, you develop a really good work ethic when you're in the military. So I can't say it's all parents, right? You have a drill sergeant. You have some kind of system where this is what everybody does, whether it's in your household. Yeah. Whether it's let's just say it's your football team. If you're in a culture that says let's win, your mindset is let's win. Mm-hmm. If you're involved in a team that really doesn't care, you know what? You're not going to get the work ethic out of it. But if you see the guys in the gym and you see the guys doing this, or the girls that are putting in extra time for practice, I think it's an association thing.
Positive peer pressure.
I think so. With my kids in particular, so we're not particularly talented kids. So we can control a couple things, and that's we can outwork everybody, and you can always do your best. Mm-hmm. And if you could do those things, people look for you and they find opportunities for you to participate in. That's just the way it works. So that's what I think. I shouldn't take much credit, as a parent. I've been active in stuff like that. I think that we've been very fortunate in life to have, kids that also responded well to that. I know not all kids do, right? Mm-hmm. So,
but part of that is the parents making them receptive to that too, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you know what I mean. And so maybe I'll credit that back to my parents and my grandparents, and just my history of where I've been and the things that shaped me. I grew up a lot around the church. In fact, probably that's where I ate a third of my meals a week, I would say, at the church, whether it was the senior citizen card club. There's always a potluck. You always know who brought the right deviled eggs and who brought the right that kind of stuff. But that's just, part of who we are. And, I try to do my best to raise our kids, with my wife, of course.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say you never really had a sort of grumbling or complaining component to your personality?
Oh, I don't think that's fair to say. We're all teenagers once,
right?
Yeah. And I think that ability, I would say that I found strength in adversity. I think that there were things that, you can grumble. I do have a tendency to find the silver lining. I do have a tendency to find something that you can gain that's positive. I strongly believe that God doesn't give you more that you can handle. Sometimes you're like, God, just give me a break for a few minutes here. But I do believe in that. And then maybe people say that that's some old adage, or maybe that's just cliche. A lot of things are cliche that are actually true. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's. But yeah, I'm a human being just like everybody else. There's definitely things that are frustrating and they can get you down. But if you find the message in it and you use that, it's a mindset. It's a mindset change. You have to change your submodality to accept some of the adversities and say, you know what? The reason why I have anxiety about this is because I got out of the attitude of learning. And if I put myself in an educational sense, that I'm learning something new, and change my mindset to say, you know what, no, this is something that is a blind spot. And I was a little bit scared about doing this, but if I really take this and take the time to study this and figure out how to remap this where it works within my brain, I bet there's a positive outcome.
Yeah. Well, and we are told to count it all joy, right? When we're confronted with trials and difficulties in life.
Yeah.
But it's good when we can step outside ourselves, like you said, and kind of look at it objectively and say, okay, this is actually a good thing. The fact that, I'm going through this particular struggle or difficulty. Whereas I think if you had the opposite attitude, then you can kind of spiral into other more self-destructive behaviors and things like that. But
sure.
Do you think it's a choice that a person makes, or is it something that's more kind of hardwired into you to be positive in the light of, or when life gives you lemons to make lemonade?
My hope would be that, again, it would be culture and the people that you surround yourself around. I think there's plenty. There's plenty, as an attorney, as a lender, as somebody who is in the fish house world and, in the outdoor space and stuff like that. The people my grandfather was on his deathbed and we had a conversation. And God, my grandfather was one of my best friends, and I'm trying not to get choked up, but I said, who will my kids be? My grandfather had been very much walking a path with people who went through recovery and this and that, volunteered a tremendous amount of time with people who experienced hardships and just really mentored through them.
Yeah.
Whether it was he got a lifetime achievement through Kiwanis, he had another career, it seemed like, in volunteerism through Habitat for Humanity. He always showed up for people. You know what I mean? He's just a great, great, great man. I asked him who my kids were, and he said, "Well, if you want to know who Parker is, my oldest, look at his friends." And he says, "I don't know." He said something about Julia. And it's like, "Well, I think she'll be your most successful child."
Wow.
And then I said, well, "What about Alicia, my youngest?" And he goes, "She's too young for me to really know, but she's in good hands."
Yeah. That's amazing that you had that conversation with him, because it's almost like at the end of the book of Genesis, where Jacob's going through and talking about each one of his sons and saying what kind of being prophetic about each one of them. But you had that similar conversation with.
Look, you don't get those opportunities back.
Yeah,
and I think that there's that's probably a little bit of a component of me too. Several of my friends from my youth, have all died.
Is that right?
Even a couple of them were my closest friends, and just call it what you want, but that's a benefit to me to realize that you only get one chance on this earth.
Yeah.
You get one time. You don't get this time back. You don't get this opportunity back. And so if you don't make the best of the opportunity that you have in front of you, it's gone. It's just gone. Because you don't know. I don't know. No, only one person knows. And, he's not going to share that with us until it's all over. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be preaching here or anything like that.
But that's great that you got such good advice from your... I guess, did he go on to say anything else?
We talked for hours.
What was his name?
Jack Olmsted. Actually, really strange. His name was Ray George Olmsted. But he's always been called Jack. And the story of why he was named Jack depends on what day it was that he wanted to tell you. I don't think he really knew the answer. It was either because of a really hardy, sturdy horse that they had as a kid, or it was the hired hand, or as many different things. I don't know. I don't know what the story was, and I think it was better that we just didn't know. But it was good. But he was a nice guy. He was really, really personal hero of mine.
So you graduated from Ottawa High School?
Graduated from Ottawa, yeah.
And what sports did you play?
I really didn't play sports. I got involved in scouting. I guess that's what I was going to say. So,
scouting.
I got involved in working. I found that working gave me opportunities. Growing up as a preacher's kid and in a parsonage and stuff, they didn't really overpay preachers at that time, and I don't think they overpay preachers today.
They probably don't. No.
Yeah, right. So, and this is kind of what brought us up to Minnesota, is that a lot of our family vacations were coming up here where my aunt and uncle lived, and that was our early exposure. They moved up here in 1979, and so once the summer we'd come up here, and through my father's ministry, he did youth wilderness trips to the Boundary Waters. My first trip through the Boundary Waters, I was 2 years old, sitting side by side with my sister in the canoe, probably restless as all get out. And I'm sure I'm pretty positive that the story goes like this. My mother said she was never going to go on another trip with my father with little kids again. So probably smart. So that was some of those draws. But no, I went to Ottawa High School. I got very much involved in Boy Scouts. I got involved in National Honor Society and some of the other things that kind of come along with effort and trying. I was an Eagle Scout, and I was very much involved in the leadership and the Order of the Arrow, which is kind of your honor roll of scouting. That was a lot of myself. It was good. I think it was a good community effort and stuff like that. It gave me the outdoors component that I really didn't have in my life that I needed. You know what I mean? I needed to be outside. I needed to be doing things, because I grew up in town. It was great for me to camp. when I was a kid and I would spend like a week or so at my grandfather's farm, which was about 3 hours away from where we lived, I would often bring a tent and ask if I could go sleep out by myself. I wanted to prove it to myself that I could do that. It's spooky the first time you camp by yourself, especially as a child. Your mind slips into its own war zone and you hear little things in the woods and you wonder what it is. Everything's going to eat you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that was kind of that. But so I graduated from Ottawa High School. I was in a few plays.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. Yeah, I was in some
Are you
theater.
still an actor?
Just right now, right? Just pretending to be somebody I'm not. No,
this is method acting.
Yeah, right. Exactly. One thing that my parents did is that I often had to fill in to be the lectern at church. Here, you got to read the scripture this morning or something like that, right? So I remember reading this thing one time that said, people's number one fear is speaking in front of people. I'm like, why? Right? It just doesn't even occur to me that that's scary. Now, if they ask me to sing in front of people, I cannot do that. You know what I mean? But to be in front, no, I know we've proven this, Zach. So being in front of people and speaking and kind of having my own identity within that has always been very comfortable for me.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to expose a younger child to. For a lot of different reasons, I would think.
Perhaps. And it was consequential, right? I mean, you don't get to choose how you're born into things. But I, again, looking for the benefits of these things. And look, I mean, it's not always easy to be the preacher's kid either. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're known and have an expectation of being this, despite you being your own person, because he's the minister, not me. So growing up with some of those things is kind of a challenge.
And then if you have any sort of, I mean, you have almost got to be perfection, because anything that goes wrong with you is immediately kind of looked at as a problem with the pastor, and is
it's a reflection, right?
Yeah,
but that's really unfair to place. And you see this. I think it's
I didn't say it was fair.
No, for sure. But you see this with police officers' kids, and you see it with maybe even teachers' kids as they're coming up through the school system. Because you have a rapport with the adult, that's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. It's hard enough to figure out your own identity in your teenage years and where you fit within high school, and the moment you graduate, you realize none of that matters, and then you got to figure out how you're going to swim as a tiny fish in a very large sea. Right. I mean, there's enough things that we still find our place every single day as adults, right? I mean, so that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody, but it happens.
But scouting seems like it was something that was really beneficial to you.
I love scouting. Yeah, I love scouting. I love the outdoors component. I like being out in the guys. My grandfather spent a lot of time when we were at our farm. He always insisted we learn to make the campfire. They grew up in the Great Depression, so we weren't going out to eat, Zach. It was, bringing hot dogs on a stick or something, open up a can of beans or something, and we'd cook that down at the campfire. And my grandfather believed that we should really spend that time you take the time to do those things. And it was always the challenge of being able to start the campfire with one match. Mm-hmm. And you never used a lighter. You never used any kind of incinerator thing. You had to go out in the woods. And he just was very, 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 very good at enabling you to think about your own survival and figure things out. Not in a harsh...
One match, meaning that you better set it up the right way, because we only got one match here.
That's right. Think all the way through to your solution, before you get there, as opposed to just, that whole... ready, fire, aim. He'd want you to be in the right method to make sure. And whether he did that, maybe it was proverbial, maybe it was much bigger than what I thought. Mm-hmm. Maybe in hindsight, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about it. But maybe it was just really simple, like, hey, I bet you can't do that. Oh, no, it was never, I bet you can't do that. It's like, let's see you do it. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So, I don't know. Character building, maybe. Yeah. But, yeah. So, scouting was good for me. Scouting was a good opportunity. I learned some early leadership skills. Some of those skills I learned by being a very poor leader. And then when you fail at something, you could either never try it again, or you could stick with it until you figure out how to kind of hone your craft a little bit.
And leadership is about changing people's attitudes.
I think so. I think we also have to be the part. You have to have convictions in what you do as a leader. So there's old thought processes that you should never ask anybody you should never ask somebody to do something you're never willing to do yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I would say that through scouting and other leadership stuff that I've been through as well, to consider leadership anything less than an art form is a mistake. You can't teach. You have to constantly hone that craft.
Yeah, and sure, some people have natural leadership skills just like they have natural basketball skills, but it's
got to fit, right? It's got to fit.
Yeah, right. And but it's sort of like you said, when you're talking about being in an environment where the coach is saying we're going to win, it becomes part of the culture, and that is really the change of a person's attitude is everything.
Sure.
You go from somebody who's depressed, down in the dumps, not really wanting to play, to all of a sudden now I'm a part of a team that's working towards a common goal, and we can thrive off of it. And but I think it's kind of the building up of people. Now, were you in the military as well?
Yep.
So you probably part of the whole process of tearing somebody down, building them up in the boot camp process is probably having something to do at least with the beginnings of leadership qualities, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so. Well, at that point there, you're not really much of a leader, right? You're definitely a follower, and if you're not, they will make you one.
Oh yeah. Right. Now, did you go into the service right after high school, or
no?
Okay.
I went off to college. So after I graduated from high school, I went to Eastern Illinois University, where I met Kim. She was I didn't meet her till my sophomore year because I'm a year older than her. She was a freshman, so we met a very long time ago. I went to college for a couple of years, and I really went off to college I went into for pre-optometry. My uncle's an optometrist, right? So I thought this would be I loved his life and everything that he was doing in his family. I'm like, I want to be just like him, And so what kind of came easy to me, there's certain things that come easy to people, right? So I'm not a great natural reader. I envy my father. He just reads and reads and reads and reads and reads. That's just not who I am. So I knew law was out, right? I knew a few other things were out. I knew English was out. I loved math, right? I just really, math came easy. That was something that was really fun for me. I didn't really enjoy, I constantly hear the echoes of my teachers in elementary school of talking about what terrible penmanship I have, and they would associate that with terrible writing skills. So writing was out, right? I didn't want to keep going down that horror path. See, I don't always respond to all the adversity properly, Zach. Although when they finally said, stop trying to write cursive in print.
Yeah.
Things got much better for
Okay. We can write faster with cursive.
Maybe I couldn't, but it's gotta be legible, right? So
to you, maybe
to me, right? Exactly. Actually, so throughout that whole process, I kind of reinvented some things. But when I went off to college, pre-optometry, but with a chemistry major. And I think I got halfway through chemistry, and I was thinking, I don't think I want to spend the rest of my life in a lab. Now, I'll be the guy that will be written up for doing dumb things, or causing trouble. And then I also kind of learned, too. You kind of learn as you get more and more exposure. And I don't mean to minimize anybody's chemistry career or anything, but to me, and the way it kind of felt, was that you kind of do other people's chemistry with a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. When you have your master's, then you become a manager. And then once you do your PhD, now you're doing the real research and the real stuff. It's your thought process. And that's where I wanted to be. But I didn't want to be broke. And it felt like a long path of being broke. And so I wanted to refocus.
Like 8 years worth or more, right?
Or more. Yeah, it could be more, and who knows? I mean, there's a lot writing in that. And then to come out on the other side, where do you really land? Academia? I don't think academia is my favorite. And then once you get to that level, it's a lot of paper writing, and it's a lot more research. And this is when it was real research. Like, you had to go to a card catalog and go into the stacks and deeper into the library. Maybe it would have been very easy today. I don't know. But I liked it. And so anyway, I went off to basic and AIT. I took a semester off in my junior year, and I was a combat engineer.
Army.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So I was combat engineer, and I was a demolition specialist. So I enjoyed that. So, working with C4 and, so there's always the upside, right? There's always, flying in on helicopters and all that's all great. We didn't do any of that, but, that's all fine and good. No, the flip side is that you're also sometimes having to, burn the latrines, right?
Yeah.
They don't sell that in the commercials, right? And so like all this cool hula kind of, destroying things and blowing up bridges and doing all these things, which are fun and real. The other thing is you're also laying on your belly with fiberglass sticks trying to clear minefields. And that's kind of scary.
Did you go, so that was part of your training to do
we had
something
lanes.
like that?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do these in lanes, and they didn't use real mines,
well,
right?
Of course,
Some severe consequences for that.
Yeah.
But they'd have stuff that they'd call mouse traps, which were kind of mild, like little poppers and stuff that would be on these mines. And sometimes they'd have one or two of them, and you'd find them like in sand. So it'd be like this elongated sandbox, almost like a bocce ball. Kind of court, and then you just kind of go along and you feel around with these fiberglass sticks and all these realities of, well, this is great if we're clearing U.S. mines, but any kind of improved pop can or Tupperware dish. Well, do you even detect that, Zach? I don't know. And it started to kind of spook me in my mind. So, like, how do I figure out how to move up in the ranks? Because usually the guy that clears that is the lowest ranking guy.
Sure.
So promotion became very important at that point. So,
so demo is not just blowing stuff up; it's also removing
you're
explosives.
very knowledgeable in the whole aspects of it, right? If you know how to make it, But I also went in some really neat booby trapping courses and stuff like that. I won't get into the weeds on that. Well, but it was very, very, very fascinating, and it just fired off all the synapses in my nerd brain. Like, oh, this is cool.
So having had that training and stuff, when you see those movies where it comes down to there's like some kind of a bomb or something and they're like, cut the blue cord or cut the red cord or anything like that, you're probably looking at that and rolling your eyes because there's not a whole lot of truth to that scenario, or is there?
There very well could be. I probably see more, some of the stuff that you see, is probably pretty real.
Really?
Some of the stuff, or some variety of real. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take a whole lot to make an improved exploding device. I mean, it's really kind of frightening what you could do. I mean, I won't say this on your podcast, but there's household stuff that you could do.
Oh,
and you get trained to do this stuff.
Well, and those improvised IEDs you're talking about, I mean, those were just a
pipe bombs with match heads and stupid things like that.
Right.
Hyper dangerous, unpredictable. When you let go of a pin of a grenade, you have exactly 4 seconds and it goes bang.
Yeah.
If you set off something else that somebody made on their coffee table,
it can literally blow up in your face.
Who knows what the timing is on that, right?
Yeah.
So this is scary stuff. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was already detonated before you got there. You don't know. You know what I mean? So, it's intimidating. Anyway, so I did that and then I did the reserves component, and I did some stuff with an ROTC and some other fun things like that. So I had a wide variety of experience. But what I would realize is I was seeking that outdoor component again in my life.
Yeah.
That was fearful of being in a lab and being in this whole thing. How do I get to the outdoors? And, again, that was kind of the running thing. Before that, I lived up in Ely for a summer, and I worked for a canoe outfitter between my freshman and sophomore year in college. And I didn't like fishing at the time, but I enjoyed the adventuring of it all. I did some solo trips.
How many Boundary Waters trips have you done?
I think up until the time I was 40, I had a trip in for every year of my life. I doubled and tripled up some. I'm probably somewhere in that 42 range.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think I don't remember these things as much. I haven't done it as much anymore as I used to, with work and interference like kids and wives and stuff like that. Gosh, all this busyness of life. The bills again, that always comes up, right? So I haven't, and it's what you value and what you want to do. My wife is not a tent camper. It's
she's a glamper.
I don't even know. I think she's a hoteler,
Okay.
or an Airbnb or a VRBO kind of.
Yeah, okay.
And you know what? It's easy to subscribe to that, and it's fun. And we've done a lot of travel and adventures and stuff like that. And I think just where I'm at in life, that's a lot more fun for me to go and explore,
rather
other
than
places.
portaging through the boundary waters and the thick of the no-see-ums and the mosquitoes.
Oh, the mosquitoes, and you're breathing them in on portage trails, and they're all hovering underneath your canoe and stuff as you're going through, doing a solo trip, and you're crossing these, pretty steep pathways and coming down slippery rocks, hitting the back of your canoe, banging it on the side, or turning and hitting this, and you hear a really big stick crash in the woods. You're like, oh God, this is it, right? So, fun stuff like that, or getting halfway across the lake and you see a lightning strike. You're like, oh my gosh, it's just me. It's either paddle or don't move, right? Fun stuff like that. I think a lot of those things that I did were about testing myself. I just did to see and test myself, see what I was made of, and see where it was. And I think going off to basic training and AIT, I just needed to know, could I do that? I think that was probably the overriding thing was I good enough to do this? Could I do this? Could I survive? And it turns out I did. And
AIT is advanced infantry training?
No, it's advanced individual training. So that's kind of like your on-the-job training, more or less.
Okay.
Whether you're infantry, you would do something there. Or my son's a cavalry scout, so you'd learn about different weapons and recognizing different vehicles and stuff like that. So, it's just a little bit more in-depth on what you do. The basic infantry soldiering is all basic training stuff.
So challenging yourself and taking solo trips up in the boundary waters would certainly be a challenge.
It is. Yeah, it's all you.
Yeah.
It's all you. And it's really quiet and it's really dark. And it's, there's certain levels, if you really want to figure out who you are, have only you and your thoughts.
Yeah.
Right? For some time, 3-4 days into it, There's a thing called going bush crazy, and there's been stories of people who maybe have capsized a canoe, or they went off to go find the latrine in the woods and couldn't find their way back, and then they find them, 2-3 days later, and they've completely lost their mind.
Is that right?
People. We're herding animals. As much as we like our solitude and everything else, we need each other. As much as I always think, a dream when I was younger. I don't have this dream anymore, but a dream I had when I was younger was to be parachuted in the middle of Canada and find my way out. I don't have those desires anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's I've graduated out of that. Like I want to be maybe not. Well, I do enjoy it. I have parachuted. That was kind of fun. I'd probably do that again. But I would rather just fly, take an Uber, get to the VRBO, and then adventure out from there. That seems like the right adventure today.
Let's just say you were going to be parachuted into Canada now to find your way out. And you could only bring, I'm going to give you 3 items.
Oh, it's an easy answer. I'm an Eagle Scout. You just bring a hatchet. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Is that it?
Well, what would my 3 items be? Oh, a hatchet for one. You could do about anything with a hatchet. Whether you make a spear or whether you do anything. You could even hit it on some flint on the back and get a spark for, all kinds of stuff. It's easy to carry, lightweight. If something's attacking you, it's not very heavy that you can swing kind of fast. There's a lot of good reasons why that's important.
Okay, so hatchet number 1.
Hatchet number 1. Primarily, rope is handy. Rope would definitely be handy, whether you need to bind up a little bit of shelter, or create something like that. And quite frankly, if there's one more thing, a lighter would be handy. There's a lot of
that's a luxury item.
That was a huge luxury. There's ways to do this without it, right? But it's really a lot easier if you got it. Thanks, Grandpa, for the 1-match lessons. Let's just do it with the lighter. I'm trying to survive. But if you're giving me the option of hey, whatever you want, I'll take a Bic lighter along the way.
You take that instead of like a water filter or anything like that. Huh?
If it depends on how far out you are. All the times I went through the boundary waters, we never used a water filter.
Really? You just drank right out of the lake?
Right out of it. Now, you don't drink on the edge of the lake or maybe where a rotting carcass is.
But you fill it up in the middle of the lake, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you ever get sick doing that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Nothing that I recall. No, I'm here. I'm here. I think that, I mean, I realize that there's parasites and there's things
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and just as the disclaimer, I'm not saying go out and start drinking lake water,
no.
anything like that. Geez, Zach.
Yeah, these are not necessarily the views of the management here.
But if you're in a very remote place in Alaska, chances are it's clean water, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's senses that we have that we could smell or we would know and things like that. But if you're thirsty, you're gonna find a way to get something in your body.
Well, I love talking about the Boundary Waters, and I'm always amazed by how many people that there are who live in this state that have never been there. And I think there's some sort of like a mystique about it, or some sort of if you tell somebody that you want to go to the Boundary Waters, like, oh, that's just way too hardcore for me. I could never do it, that kind of thing. And it's not like glamping like we were saying before, but there are trips that a person could take just to kind of get their their feet wet. I mean,
well, you would
literally and figuratively. But what would you tell somebody who's going to have, kind of apprehensive about going in there for the first time?
Yeah. Well, let me back up real quick. I'm still reeling on the 3 items.
Okay.
I think I'd give up the lighter and go for a good pair of boots. Yeah. Honestly. Okay. So what would I tell the person that would do it for the first time?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's an overlooked caveat to people who go to the Boundary Waters. My allure to the Boundary Waters is I grew up around cornfields. You're from Stillwater, right? So you're a little bit more. It's more rural.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as it used to be. But
Yeah.
a little bit more
But
rural.
when I was there,
you don't
it was
have
more
pine
rural.
trees there. You don't
Not
have
really,
as much
yeah.
forest. You have stuff close to the river.
Yep.
And I'm pretending like I grew up there, but I did not.
It's
But
more
I've
of a
driven-
deciduous forest, yes.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, what I found, and even through scouting and stuff like that with the boys up here, they already got all that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think I'll give the people from Hubbard County in particular an out on that experience. But I think for anybody who was interested in going to the Boundary Waters, I've sat down and kind of consulted several different people, like, hey, here's the things that you need to bring. Here's an easy route.
Yeah.
I think that if you had a desire to do this, then you should probably connect with somebody who's been. I think that would be a really good thing to do. I don't think you need to find a fishing guide.
Yeah.
I mean, not to take away from fishing guides, but fishing's an added benefit.
Yeah.
There's good fish to find between here and there in about 600 lakes, right? So I think that you need to find somebody who either have somebody on your team who's good with a compass and map reading, right? And I don't mean a GPS, because that's not going to work out there, right? I mean, understand a contour map, what topographical maps mean and look like, associate that with a compass. I think that's pretty big. Somebody who has a decent sense of judgment when it comes to weather, I think is pretty big deal. Weather's a big deal. It could either be your friend or your enemy, right? Somebody who has some outdoors component experience. And if you have those 3 things, I would never recommend somebody go out and do a Boundary Waters trip as a solo for the first time.
No.
There are people out there that certainly could do that
If they had other survival skills.
Yeah, if they had
experience.
but you'd have to have a fair amount of background, right? You'd have to be the right person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's plenty of people that solo in it. They find their peace, and I think that that's great. And I'll probably do that again at some point. And just, it's nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I'd recommend to somebody is, get hooked up with a team or a group that's going, whether maybe it's through a church or maybe with scout trips, if your kids are involved in that, or find some sign up. I don't know if there's anything for community ed where they go to
like Outward Bound or something like
Outward Bound, I think, is more youth driven, but there are things like that. But there's groups that do that. It's not like canoeing down the Crow Wing River and calling it a day, pulling over, set up a tent, and going home. Right? Get rained on for 4 days straight and try to start a fire, right? Or be out 3 days and you roll a canoe and all your stuff goes to the bottom. You got to figure out how to get back.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to scare anybody off.
No.
But you better be prepared for this.
Sure.
You better be prepared to come across the lake in the middle of June and you hear that little ting, 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 ting as you cut through the layer of ice because it just snowed that night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are things that you need to know about your boundary waters, and there's things, because the Arrowhead, that whole area up there is not part of the rest of the state.
No.
It is its own climate. It's its own thing.
It's true.
It's very different. But I would recommend anybody do it.
Yeah.
But I think you team up with the right people. I think when you go, if you have to love the outdoors. I took my wife up there, who is not a tent camper. By the way, I got a short list of the do not return home if you talk about. This is not on the list.
Okay. All right. Good.
Right? But I took her up there, and she's not a tent camper.
Yeah.
And we went up to the Boundary Waters. I went with the guy, Andy Kitzman, who's the ranger at the Boy Scout camp in Park Rapids at Camp Wilderness.
I think that name's familiar. Yeah.
Andy and I actually met each other years and years and years ago in Illinois. He's from Illinois, too, at some camp. But that's a whole different story. So our daughters were very close. We went up to the Boundary Waters, and it was like a 4-day trip. We just paddle out for one day. We get set up, and we go. And if something could go wrong, it did. For most everybody's first trip up there. It rained constantly. And so we tried to put a tarp over top of the fireplace so we can keep that dry. So that means that you have wet skin, wet eyes, wet clothes, constantly. Wet feet in constant smoke.
Yeah.
Right? Which just, and you put enough smoke in somebody's eyes from a campfire that's being hovered in there with the low pressure system and everything else, people get grouchy.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're wet and cold on top of that. And then the ability to maybe go swimming or to be able to go out fishing or anything else. We had constant wind pressuring us. And we were stuck on a less than desirable campsite in the Lake 1, 2, 3, 4 chain.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, which burned down.
Where did you put in? Over there?
We put in,
is it Snowbank around there? Or?
Well, Snowbank's in there. You don't really. I've been on Snowbank many times. That is not a first time access to going off Snowbank. That's 3 miles by 5 miles across, and a little bit of wind can make that thing rocking and rolling.
I know.
I've been on that before. Trips, people roll over on that a lot. That's a dangerous lake if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's too big to skirt around it to try to avoid it. I mean, you can go an extra 9 miles by
go
canoe.
Through. Yeah.
And at 2 miles an hour, you're 4.5 hours.
To get to that, I think it's Parent Lake. Is you try to portage to up there?
Well, there's two. Yeah. There's two lakes out of there, but
anyway,
or 2 portages out. Yeah. So I mean, Snowbank is a cool place, and I like that.
But you had a really that we went
on
stuck
Lake
at a less than
One.
Desirable campsite.
It was. I mean, it was like it wasn't flat. It was kind of up a hillside. The trees had long since blown down.
And you're going to be
burnt.
there for 4 days.
We were going to try to set up and then go to another campsite in a day or two. It's just no one moved. You know what I mean? No other and it wasn't okay for us to just go. We couldn't even take a light canoe. The only time that we took the canoes out was when we went to get some water and bring it back, and it was sketchy enough.
Yeah.
So it was bad, and we basically spent 3 days in a tent of something that
the tent. Yeah.
It's a lot of alone. That's a lot of time with the ones you love.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So there's a lot of
cards
memories
or something, or what?
Cards kind of run their time too. You know what I mean? So it was. Now, I'll tell you, my son Parker, who does a lot of camping, because he's an Eagle Scout too, and Julia had been in the Boundary Waters a few times. Now they had friends there, but Parker was kind of alone too on this, and I won't get too far into it. But you take like guys like Andy, myself, or Parker, who have been on many, 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 many campouts. We know that on the next camp out it could be sunny.
Yeah.
This isn't our one and only.
No.
This is just one of many, 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 many campouts. And so sometimes it rains, sometimes the sun shines, right? Mm-hmm. But we've had the long history of knowing
over
that
time.
it cycles, right? Where everybody else is like, this is the worst thing that's ever
I'll
happened.
never do this again.
And the promise of, it's probably going to be much nicer weather next time we go is an immediate no.
No. It's just the law of first impressions, right?
Of course it is. Yeah. When you bust out of that egg for the first time and go, Mama, this is horrible. I'm out of here. It's done. Yeah, it's never going back. So I think Kim liked Ely, in all fairness. That was kind of a neat town. A lot different than when I lived there.
Oh, yeah. It's changed so much.
Big time. Yeah. There's some cool stuff up there. And so, there's a resort on Snowbank that we go to, or we have been to, where we could take a 25-horse motor, zip out there, do some fishing, come back, and then stay in a nice, firm structure. Yeah. That's a little bit easier to do.
That sounds pretty nice, too, yeah.
It is nice, because you still have the allure of, being out in the boundary waters where you're not seeing people and there's not motors ripping by you and all this other stuff, you have the quiet, you have the eagles, you have, you're seeing the tulipes jumping, and, you've got the elements that you want. Just really convenient to get back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
and bathrooms. That was kind of,
and that's nice
that
too.
Was a big negative
Instead of those like vault toilets that they have.
These are fiberglass. They used to be wood. They're both yuck. As far as they are.
I mean, you just have to get over it. But yeah, it's not a when
right.
you show somebody that's the toilet for the first time, they're like, "That's the toilet."
Right. And the story of the last campsite I was at didn't even have one. We had to go just sit on the end of a log, and they're like, that's a big no-go for us.
Right. Yeah. Here's a spade. That's you make your own toilet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So okay, you had gone through the Army. You were in the reserves, and then why did you move up to this area? What, I mean, I understand that you visited and all that stuff, but what kind of got you to?
So I had a lot of draw to the boundary waters. Had a lot of draw up here, and So after college, I got involved in the car business. I learned that I enjoyed sales a lot when I was in college. I sold Cutco cutlery for a while, and I found a lot of success with that. And I started realizing a lot of things fit in my life that were not part of what I thought I was planning.
Okay.
Right? So I had also kind of recircled around and kind of changed my direction of chemistry to chemistry and business, thinking pharmaceutical sales.
Yeah.
Turned out I didn't kind of fit the mold of what a typical pharmaceutical saleswoman or person looks like. So that didn't work out as great.
Is this the point where you decided to start fabricating methamphetamines? No, I'm just kidding.
Wouldn't be that hard, but no, I did not. Yeah. So maybe you saw the movie about my life, Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
No. Call me Mr. White.
Okay. Yeah. Heisenberg.
Heisenberg.
You kind of have the look.
Oh, yeah, right. I really do. No. So anyway, a great show by the way. So anyway, we're absolutely nobody in that show is a good guy. Everybody's a bad guy. Which one's the least worst that you like the most? It's so strange. But anyway, I did outside sales. And I found a lot of success, and I really, really enjoyed it. It fit good with me. It fit good with kind of my natural tendencies to talk and storytell and use analogies. That fits really well with that kind of world. And what didn't, I needed a little bit more structure, especially as a young man. And so I thought, well, it would be a really hard and tough way to test my skills. Let me see where I'm at. Let me, again, proving myself. I thought, the car business. Where can you go where everybody naturally just hates you? No offense, car guys, but this is the kind of way it was in the 90s. And I thought, you know what? If I could find success in that, I bet I could do about anything. And I went into the car business, and it worked. It worked well. It turns out, Zach, if you treat people nice and you care about them and you generally are interested in what their needs and wants are, people like you. Isn't that strange?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
You talk in terms of the other person's interests, and lo and behold. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You assist them, not grind them out. You know what I mean? So I learned that, and then I got involved in finance. Numbers kind of came easy, and I got involved in auto finance. And I did auto finance for, I didn't really care for the car business. 7.5 years later, I'm still in the car business. And, at that point, one of the owners of the place that I started at in the car business had opened up a dealership over in Indianapolis. He asked me if I wanted to, come in and help him get the dealership set up with banks and financing. And that was something I had, even in an interim, did some consulting where I'd helped out dealerships build up their businesses.
So you were still in Illinois at this time?
Illinois. When I was doing consulting work, I was in Iowa and South Dakota and Missouri and St. Louis area. It was relatively short-lived. I didn't enjoy living on the road like that. Yeah. It's like get a condo, be there for 2 months, not having an address, not having stuff. Not to be materialistic, but that nomad life's really tough. Yeah. And some people love it. That wasn't me, right? I knew that I wanted a family at some point. I knew that I wanted a wife. I knew I wanted to create a life, grow some roots someplace. Hadn't figured that out yet. So anyway, I was over in Indianapolis. Kim and I got engaged, got married. Along comes child, and I get a phone call. Hey, your son's crawling. you're missing us.
You're missing it, yeah.
And being the finance guy 45 minutes away from where I lived, if a deal goes till 9 o'clock at night, I might be getting home at 10. Of course, you're not wound down right away. You're
the guy that the salesman's saying, I got to go talk to my finance manager about this deal or something.
Well, they're probably talking to the car manager, right? The sales manager, and then the salesman. Then I'm the guy that you would say, all right, well, whether you want to pay for this car or not, he might talk to you about an extended warranty, gap protection, credit life, disability, whatever else. Yeah. That was me, right? Being able to hang we called that hanging paper, right? So, we spot delivered everything. So if you had let's just say you had a 720 credit score, at that point, I would just have to be able to look at that, compute. Well, when I first started doing finance, there were no credit scores. It was metrics lending, so you kind of had to figure out the matrix and figure out what those were, which helped me have a foundation of understanding what credit scores were, because it kind of made sense. Then those evolved over time.
Sure.
But basically, being able to fit that to a program that some other bank had, whether it was WFS, Triad, Financial, Ford, whatever it might have been, I just knew all that. Like a small database in my mind. These are the ones that I knew I could work with. Put those together. I was doing that. I enjoyed it. I liked. So when people come together and they're talking about the financing of their car, whether it's payment, down payment, or can we afford to do this or not, there's a lot of decisions, and this is like basically the second biggest purchase for most people's lives, next to their house. It turns out that if you listen to what their needs and wants are, you're kind to them, help assist them, and rationalize and give people good information, they might like you, and they may do those things again, right? And so I think just genuinely caring about people is able to put people at ease, and I found a lot of success in that as well. Then I went into mortgages.
Okay, so before we get to mortgages, I just, there's in the world of YouTube Shorts and TikTok and stuff like that, sometimes there's one particular guy who pops into my feed. I'm not going to say who he is or anything that, but he really specializes, and I don't know why. I've always had an interest in sales, maybe because my dad was a salesman too, and even though I've never really sold anything in my, I've never actually.
You're an attorney. You
negotiate for a living. You sell, but it's a different deal. But
it's about the same. I think since the moment a child cries for their mother's milk, they become a salesperson.
Okay,
that's my mind. They're really effective salespeople too, by the way. They'll cry and cry and cry until they get their way. We all have sales. You just have to embrace where those skill sets hit what your occupation is. Anyway,
but anyway, so somebody who's had success in the field, I mean, I see a lot of it pushed that, the sort of like the high pressure sales, like the idea of sales is about overcoming objections, right? And so, I'm making a proposition as the salesman, and you have objections. Like I'm telling you, you got to buy this car, and you say, "Oh, that's really out of my price range," or "I don't know, I got to think about it," or I'm gonna go check out another dealership, or maybe this isn't just the right time for me to buy, and then the whole thing is sort of geared toward how to overcome each and every one of these specific objections, which seems almost like the exact opposite of what you're talking about, which is, not.
Yeah, it's
maybe it is, maybe it's not. I'd like to hear from you.
I would say that if you're at a point where you walk into a deal and you're trying to start working through objections, and you missed step one, which is building rapport.
Yeah,
you're not going anywhere. Anyway,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it all starts with the handshake. All starts with rapport, a general respect.
Sure.
Right? And then really understanding what people's needs and wants are. Taking the time to listen, well, that just validates the conversation all the way through. And that almost might sound cringe. It's like, oh, is he doing this? No, just really care.
Well, it has to be genuine, right?
It does have to be
genuine. Take a genuine interest in people is one of the things that...
I mean, you got to be competent.
Yeah.
Right? You got to be competent. You got to be able... So, people often say, oh, my car salesman lies to me all the time. Well, I don't know. I'll take the car salesman's side just a little bit. Not to say that they are or are not lying to you, but 98% of car salesmen don't make it through the first year of the car business. So if you go in and you buy a car and you never met your salesman before, there's a very, 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 very good chance they're brand new. Because the guy that's been selling cars for 15 or 20 years already has a full book of business, and he probably doesn't have a whole lot of time to talk to you unless you're referred in by X, Y, or Z.
A full book of return customers.
Yeah. Right, of course. Mm-hmm. And so you're probably always talking to somebody new. So where people read that they might be lying to them might be because they're uncertain about the information that they're delivering to you. It may just be a little bit lesser in the competence. That doesn't mean that they're bad people.
No.
But maybe they don't have the history of what the progression of this Chevy truck has done over time compared to what this 85 to the 2000s to now. And this is where it's at. But I'm trying to figure out these things. I don't know if they're lying necessarily. I think they're trying to be competent. And I think as they're searching for that answer, people misread that nonverbal cue as they're making something up. Whereas they may be recalling something that's recent they're not 100% sure of. You're still reading some kind of interference there, but it may be misplaced. And then there's a fair amount of people that are going to lie to you because that's just their insecurity.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to sort through those people anyway. Before you even get to that point whether this is the one you want to deal with or not.
So if you're this young salesman, and I mean, obviously you want to study up on the product that you're selling and knowing everything,
Yeah.
Could
you handle a court case that you didn't know the law about?
No, I wouldn't. But I would also tell the person up front. I would say this is not a case. This is not the area of law that I'm familiar with. And if I tell them, 9 times out of 10, I'll tell them I won't take the case. But I'll say, if you want me to, what
about in your first year of law?
Well, yeah, no. I mean, I've been practicing for 20 years, so I can kind of figure it out.
So you're the guy, right? So you're the guy that's got a little bit more honed craft. You know where your specialty is and stuff.
But honestly, though, when you're in your first few years, my path is a little bit different because I was a prosecutor when I got out of law school, so I didn't have clients, which is one of the nice things about being a prosecutor is that you don't have any clients. But which is not to say I don't love having clients. I love my clients, but of course, you get a chance to practice law without being directly accountable to one particular person or set of people who are paying your bills, right. And so you kind of get to experiment a little bit about what I can say, what I can't say with the judges and everything like that. But then as you kind of gain confidence and ability, then you can kind of gauge a situation depending on what the particular problem is that's presented, and things that can always be researched, and you can, if you can't find the answer yourself, you can figure out how to either find it or refer the person to somebody who would know the answer to it. Right. But I mean, in terms of sales, like if you can't develop a full encyclopedic knowledge, a comprehensive encyclopedic knowledge of your product, and you're confronted with a question from a customer that you really don't know the answer to, I mean, how would a young salesperson respond in that situation appropriately?
Zach, that's a good question. I don't know, but let me figure out something that's important to me. Let me write it down. Yeah. So write down the question. I'm going to follow up with you on that. Let's go through the rest of this, and then if there's any other questions like that I don't know the answer to, then let me write those down. I'll get those answers. But let's keep going with this right now, unless you want me to stop. Right. That's a little bit of permission. See. And if you want me to find out right now, I will. Yeah. Yeah. No matter what you do, though, just like management, just like leadership, just like fatherhood, just like being professional, you better close the loop. If you tell somebody that you're going to do something, you don't come back and do it, you're breaking trust. Oh, yeah. Right? I tell my kids, I'm raising, no matter how ugly it is, you always tell the truth. Yeah. People can forgive a mistake. Dad, I crashed the car. Right? Oh, man. Were you hurt? Right? That kind of stuff. How bad's the car? Did anybody else get hurt? That people can forgive a mistake. But if you go outside and you see the cars crashed and everybody's like, well, I don't know who did it, right? There's some distrust, right? So people, no matter how ugly it is, always tell the truth. Trust is fragile. You almost never, ever, ever get an opportunity to fully get it back. Never. And you're far better off owning that you don't know something because you're telling the truth. Is it a mistake that you don't know everything? It feels like it sometimes when someone's asking you a question. Because you feel like maybe you might be letting them down. So people panic and they'll just say something, whether it's true or not. We all have fumbled through relationships, right? Not me yet. Of course not, maybe you have, but no. Right. Well, not all romantic ones, but any kind of relationship. I mean, we've all fumbled through things. You know what I mean? And sometimes in the urge to not hurt somebody or let somebody down, we may make the wrong call. And that's natural. It's just, but when people are like in this car business or, home buying and stuff like that, you're on high alert. Even if you're buying a couch, It's not whether or not you want to decide to buy this couch or not. I'm spending most of my time talking myself out of this. Give me a reason not to buy. Give me a reason not to buy this car. Give me a reason not to buy this house. And it's weird. That's human nature. You walk into the hardware store perfectly knowing that you don't know where a deadbolt is. Sir, can I help you find anything? No, I'm fine. I'm just looking, right? Why do we do that?
Yeah, there's
I don't do that anymore. I'm like, yes, tell me where the deadbolt is so I can get back on my project.
I know. But
people grew out of that, right?
People think that you're going to be looked at as incompetent if you have to ask a question like
Nobody
that.
wants to look incompetent, and I think that's kind of part of that whole deal where the panic steps in and people will say something responsive, but you're so much better to acknowledge what the question is, and I find that it's better just to write down the question. Because now it isn't just an active listening skill. One, it's a checkbox for me to come back and finish, and I don't forget it. Two, it really validates the question that's being asked. And it tells you that I'm listening to you. And I think by doing that, I mean, you have legal pads, right? When you talk to somebody, you probably take a lot of notes. There's a lot of details and a lot of information. I don't know why I'm pretending to understand law, but I would presume that this is what I would be looking for, as my attorney writing this down, or they playing up like some game on their phone when I'm talking to them. I don't know.
Yeah, there's one attorney who told me once that if it's important enough, I'll remember it, which I think in the long run, it's probably not good advice.
Yeah, right. In the world of long COVID and other things going on, that's a risky proposition these days. So, So anyway, I went down the car business road for a while, and then I really wanted a job where I wasn't working weekends or long nights anymore. Right around that time that kids were there, and the mortgage world seemed very natural. Yeah, talking about people's finances, being in the financial world,
good with numbers,
helping people kind of, and this is pre-computers. It makes me sound really old. They did not want us using computers because they might be a distraction. So it's a lot of phone skills, a lot of this and that, and went through that, and then as that progressed. That was during the refinance boom, and our mortgage broker didn't want us doing purchases. I'm like, well, at some point, refis, we need to get into purchases now. And so I felt that was a little risky as the refi boom was ending. So I went into doing the purchase market and refi, and got my own broker license. Had a couple of loan processors. And
were you doing that up here or somewhere else?
In Indiana.
Oh, in Indiana.
In Indianapolis still. Okay. Yep. And then also in 2008, 2009. Yeah. You probably heard, but the mortgage world stopped.
Oh, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So
yeah,
that was it. I had some rentals. We sold those. Basically everything we came into that world with. We came out with slightly more. We didn't make a whole lot of forward progress, but we didn't get hurt terribly. Yeah. My father and my mother were getting ready to retire from Illinois up to Park Rapids. Yep. Parker was going to be starting kindergarten pretty soon. Mm-hmm. Everything just seemed right. We were having some conversations within our relationship of I don't want to go to Minnesota every summer. I would like to go vacation other places too. And there was many reasons other than that why it made sense to move up to Minnesota. But it was kind of where the family centered. And it was an easy place to come in for a landing. It was an easy place where I knew some people for a significant amount of time. Now, maybe we didn't, have working relationships. I didn't have that embedded network. A lot of those people were getting ready to retire too, right? So I didn't have that embedded network that maybe I probably overplayed my cards on. But we came up here and then just started searching for work. And it was hard. I was self-employed for a long time. And so people were not just ready to hire you. And one thing led to another. And then I wake up 14 years later and I have this accidental fish house career in the middle. And what's interesting is a lot of people just know me from this fish house world and the videography and the storytelling and the fishing, blah, 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 adventuring. But really, I've always been a finance guy in the background. And so, now that I took on this new job as a mortgage lender, it's new for a lot of people. Yeah. But I'm like, I started doing this back in 1996, my friend. I'm a long ways into this. I'm 25 years plus into the finance world. When I was in the car business, I would turn 100+ car loans a month, right? I mean, hundreds and hundreds, doing thousands a year. And, how many credit reports do you look at in between there? And then going into the mortgage world and doing all this other stuff, so I have a tremendous amount of financial background, in all this. And we use that in the fish house world, too, for lending and setting up banks and finding banks that get more comfortable, because that wasn't so much of a thing at one time. Even working with Ice Castle, saying, hey, this RVIA stuff would really help me get longer terms on fish houses. Worked with Jeff Drexler, who owns Ice Castle. I'm like, all right, we'll work on getting that. You're not the only one that's saying that, blah, 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 blah. And then one thing led to another. It was a fun career. The fish house world was fun.
Yeah.
After the last 2 winters, I'm really glad I'm not in it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
but it's a fun career. I've met amazing people along the way, and it's been a fun thing to take my kids along for the ride on, my wife and everything else.
Yeah. So at Northview, I don't want to misstate it again, Northview, do you pretty much only do residential mortgage, or do you do any kind of commercial lending, or like HELOCs and stuff like that too?
Sure.
Or,
Yeah. So, currently within my position, I'm doing consumer lending and mortgage lending, residential mortgage lending, to include home equity line of credits, land loans, and lake home, that kind of stuff. Construction loans. It's fun. It's so much fun. People, they're looking to do this financing for these really great homes that they've had this property and dreams. And, it's just, in the fish house world, that's more of a reward. In car business, people either need it or they want it.
Yeah.
And more of them have to have it, right? So there's a little bit of pressure on that. Houses, that's a little bit more rewarding. I remember being a mortgage broker, and I thought, wow, it's really weird to come to work where people don't just naturally hate you. This is nice. And then, and this, that's not how it is in today's world either. It's just, fish houses were a reward item, and that was, it's a toy purchase. In this kind of lending experience, you meet people at very different parts of their financial journey.
Right.
Whether they're just trying to establish credit, whether they might have gone through something in their life, like 55% of ex-married couple did, rebuilding that back up, or maybe they're doing estate planning, for their family, or maybe they're buying their first house, maybe they're buying their second house, maybe they're trying to buy some hunting land in addition to their house. Or maybe they've had this land and now they're ready to build a retirement home. Or maybe they're buying their 15th home and doing a VRBO. It's just, there's a lot. Now, on the commercial side, certainly I can liaison a lot of that. I know so many business owners, and I know a ton of manufacturing guys and, stuff like that. So, I'm an inward conduit of getting inside track to help people put together commercial stuff. That's a fun world for me to be in.
And I'm sure your knowledge of the area is really helpful in making your decisions as a lender and stuff like that too, particularly with respect to the fishing around here. I think, right?
Turns out, if you're saying, hey, is this a good lake to go fishing on? I might know. You know what I mean? I'm no Jason Durham. That guy, I don't even know. I've asked Jason several times, like, how do you not lose your love of fishing by putting in that much time working for other people?
He loves it.
I've guided people. I will not charge people to guide. If they choose to give me something at the end of the trip, that's fine. But I don't want to make it weird. You know what I mean? Sure. It's just like, let's go out as just two people and go fishing and have a good time. You know what I mean? And that anything beyond that feels like I'm responsible for their outcome, right? And kudos to him. But, I've gone fishing a lot with a lot of different people. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But and hunting land too. I'm a hunter as well. And people will say, what do you know about this or that? It's like, well, if you look at the Google Maps, you can see this trail here going towards water. Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that. It's fun. It's fun. It's like, you can look through it. It's kind of like, listening to their needs and wants and stuff like that. It's easy to get excited about people when they're looking at their hunting land and telling you what they want to do with their
right
friends.
In there with them, right?
Yeah, exactly. God, I wish I was doing that too. I know I can't own 16,000 acres of land, you know what I mean? And I have no desire to take care of that much also. Yeah. But it's fun. It's just so much fun. And it's handy being a little bit older, being in your early 20s when you're starting out, you're fighting for a little bit of credibility anyway. I always thought it'd be a little bit easier if I had some gray hair or if I had a little couple.
That's why I dye mine this way.
Right. Yeah, it's a little salt and pepper mix in there. That's why I cut it off so they don't know the difference. Right. So, I mean, it's helpful because, obviously I've been maybe it's not obvious, but I've been a homeowner for years. I've bought and sold different cars and bought and sold different homes and rentals and some commercial buildings and stuff like that. Yeah. And, I've got a few chapters in my book written, right? So, makes it easier to hear. It makes it a little bit easier to recognize maybe some people's apprehensions to asking certain questions.
I mean, it's. I think with age comes sort of like this sense of like peace and a calming influence that
hopefully
because I know, like, I think it just recently happened, like maybe within the last 2 or 3 years, where I don't get surprised or I don't want to say surprised, but just like flustered or like overwhelmed with when being confronted with some kind of a new situation, because I mean, I'm not going to say that I've seen it all or I've done it all, but I've probably seen something like it, and I kind of have a good idea of how it's going to turn out. And if it doesn't turn out that way, well, there's really nothing that could have been done about it anyway, depending on what the facts are. So that I think it's just maybe it's just a byproduct of wisdom, or it is wisdom itself, but it's just sort of to be more calm and peaceful when you're dealing with other people who are oftentimes really nervous or upset, anxious, excited, whatever the gamut of emotions that come, Well,
you're 100% right. And, when people are having that conversation and they can feel at ease because they're not alarming you.
Yeah.
I mean, what if you respond to my anxiety? It's like, I wouldn't do that either.
Yeah, you're like,
that's really pushing the sail down the road.
Do this, you're like, whoa, I've never heard of anybody wanting to do that before.
Sure, you want to do that?
That's crazy.
Oh, I know 3 people that whatever. I mean, just I mean that's you don't want to overreach, but just and being fascinated by other people's stories. The thing is, it's interesting. You talked about how people have not been to the Boundary Waters that live up in this area. And yes, I gave them a quick out. I didn't follow up with that to say, but I won't give people an out that have lived in this area their whole life and still have never been to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And there are people in this area that have. And you know what? If you're listening to this, get your butt up the road 26 miles and go see it. Just for nothing else that I'll get off your back. I mean, Boundary Waters, I can forgive it. We got a lot of trees, mosquitoes, lakes, and everything else. Okay, fine. Whatever. I mean, that's not your deal. But, jeez, that's a Mississippi River, folks.
I was just up there. I was just up there yesterday.
Yeah.
Good
for you,
with,
Zach.
With some kids.
Just in case I was going to call you on it.
And I actually had made the comment that I don't really feel as though a lot of the local people come here. Because when I got there, it was maybe there was 2 or 3 other cars in the parking lot. It was a beautiful afternoon, just almost perfect. It was maybe if we could have just dialed back the wind just
it was a little windy. Yeah.
But aside from that, it was just perfect. By the time we got back, we were the only 2 cars in the lot, and it was about 4:35 in the afternoon or something like that. And it's so funny you say that. I said I do not think that local people go up there.
They don't. Yeah. And some have never been. And
that's why?
That's mine. I don't know. I met some people here within the last 2 weeks that grew up here. Yeah. And I sound like I'm being hard on people that grew up here because these people.
I know, and I am too. I am too.
They exist in all communities. They do. Okay, so it's not. It's not. Hey, these people park around.
It's like in New York. If you're from New York, it's not like you're gonna go up in the Statue of Liberty like 20 times.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. When I lived in the Chicagoland area or close by, we never did all that stuff.
Right. Sure.
Right. I could always do that. Right. So you kind of take it for granted. So I sort of get that a little bit. But, but I did meet somebody the other day, and I'm a traveler. I like to travel. I like to go out and do those adventures, with my wife and stuff and, friends. And I met someone the other day that had said they've never even been outside of the state. I'm like, not even Fargo? They're like, oh, no, we don't go to that town.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And it just, fine. So you don't. It's a big contrast from my values. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. That's a big one for me to like, wow, that's a reality that we deal with. It's just different. It's just different than who I am. And you don't have to be me. My God, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No. Well, Mark, we didn't even get a chance to touch on ice fishing. And as we were kind of progressing through the conversation, I was thinking to myself that maybe that would be something that we could talk about next year at the beginning of the ice fishing season.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think we would need a whole, another hour and a half to get through at least 1% of your knowledge on that subject. But so with that said, I'd kind of like to wrap things up by asking you, what kind of general advice would you give? I mean, I know you've kind of given a lot during the course of our conversation today, but somebody who's about to graduate, now we got graduation coming up next month. What kind of a general advice would you give to a young person going forward?
Sort your team. And, I think a lot of the things that I keep reflecting back on are your relationships. Whether it's the trust that you have between two people. I think, trust your instincts, but start building your team in life. Mm-hmm. You've got a, in high school in particular or in college, you have a group that is just like you. That's not how the world works, right? You're out in the world and you have to start building, that group around you. Make good choices. Like what Grandpa said, if you want to know who your son is, look at his friends. Look at your friends. Who are you hanging out with? Who are you spending your time with? They say if you want to be a millionaire, hang out with millionaires. If you want to be a billionaire, hang out with billionaires. There's far less of them. If you want to hang out with people if you want to go hunting with other people, you have to hang out with people that hunt. If you want to hang out with if you want to be a better fisherman, hang out with better fishermen. It's not really uncommon that there's a saying that goes like this: if you live in poverty, don't take financial advice from your neighborhood.
I've heard something like that.
Yeah, sure, right. And so, if you want to move up or improve your life or find something that meets your values, then you associate yourself with people who share your values. And I would say that other thing, a piece of advice, no matter how ugly it is, always tell the truth. Mm-hmm. Trust is fragile. Being honest is a tremendous amount
credibility is the only thing you have.
It really, really, really is. And I think, lastly, give yourself the room and space as you take your next few pages to write in your book, opportunities to be exposed to other things. You don't need to go from high school and you don't need to go from college and figure out what you're doing for the next 40 years of your life. Life is an entire system of options, choices, people, relationships. And if you give yourself enough time and you give yourself a real hard go, give everything that you do an honest go, right? But give yourself the flexibility to make changes, because we all have something that we're great at. We don't all have the opportunities or the history that says we figured out what that was. Give yourself the flexibility to live your life and do your best.
Wise words from Mark Harmon, and thank you very much for being on the Northwestern Voices podcast. I truly appreciate it. And Mark, you can look him up at Northview Bank.
Northview Bank, that's what we call it. Yeah,
right.
Northview Bank. Yeah, come on in and see me. We'll get it taken care of.
Thank you, Mark Harmon.
Sure, absolutely, Zach. It's been a lot of fun.
It has. All right.
Take care.